In this video, I want to answer a really simple question. This question came up on a LinkedIn post that I commented on, and the surveyor that made the post on LinkedIn was highlighting an article. It was like I don't know if you want to call it a self-help article or a how-to article that basically said you should be able to get a boundary survey for a few $100s. And my comment was that I thought that was absolutely not true. You can get a boundary survey for a few $100s, but not a good one. And that I thought that the article was harmful to the public and it was spreading bad information. And there was another surveyor that replied to my comment on that post on LinkedIn and said that he disagreed with me and that he thought that you could get a boundary survey for a few $100s. And he gave an example of why he thought that was, or in what situation he thought you could do that. And he was very respectful, and him and I had a pleasant exchange. But I strongly disagree with his premise, even with the example that he gave. And so I wanted to do a little video that explained why I disagreed with his premise, and answer that basic question: can you get a good boundary survey, even on a small residential parcel, for a few $100s? And if you can't, then why are people doing them? Why do we have this idea that you can get a boundary survey for a few $100s? I think there's two main reasons for that. So I want to answer those two questions. I will say that I have a lot more that I want to share about what boundary surveying should cost and why boundary surveying costs what it does, because I think surveyors don't do a good job of explaining that to the marketplace and to their clients. So I want to try and do that, but I'd like to keep these videos short. So I'm going to try and keep this video focused on these two questions. Can you do a good boundary survey for a few $100s? And if not, why do we have this idea in the marketplace that you can? So I want to just answer those two questions, and then I'll do some follow-up videos that look at what should a boundary survey really cost, what factors impact the cost of a boundary survey, and how do you know if you're paying for a good product. So let's get to those two questions for this video. The first is, can you do a good boundary survey for a few $100s, even on a small residential parcel? I believe the answer is no, that you can't do that. It's really not possible to do that. So if someone is charging you a few $100s for a boundary survey, you are probably not getting good value, and you're probably not getting a good boundary survey. And not only are you probably wasting your money, but you're potentially opening yourself up to some really severe consequences if you rely on a bad survey, for example, to build improvements, let's say, on a lot. So why can't you do a boundary survey for a couple $100s? Well, you can really only do a boundary survey for a couple $100s. So I'm talking about a range here, a couple $100s to a few $100s, under $1,000, let's say. You can really only do that if one of three things applies. So, and I wrote them down because I didn't want to forget them. You can really only do a boundary survey for a few $100s if you aren't doing it correctly. And I can say that because there's just too much work if you're doing it right. So you either got to be taking a shortcut, not doing it correctly. You really aren't a legitimate business. And by that, I mean you don't carry professional liability and business insurance. You don't have a website. You don't have a phone number. People can't get a hold of you. So, if you're a retired Department of Transportation employee working out of your garage and you never answer your phone, then you have very low overhead costs, but I don't consider those guys to be legitimate businesses. So that's the second way. Or the third thing is you're just not covering your costs. And there are times when I will do what I call charity work, in air quotes, for friends or family. If I have a friend or family member that comes to me and wants a boundary survey on a residential piece of property, I'll just do it for free. I don't even charge them because I can't charge them enough to cover my costs, and I don't want them to deal with some of the snakes that are in the residential surveying market. So a lot of times it's a few $1,000s of my time, and a lot of times if it's a close friend or a family member, I'll just take care of it. So if you're doing charity work, then you obviously don't need to cover your costs. So then that brings us to the second question. if you really can't do a boundary survey on a small residential lot for a few $100s, why do people have that idea that you can't? And I really think there's two basic reasons for that, maybe three. So the first reason is there are people, especially in the eastern part of the United States, that do what's called a mortgage survey, and I'll put that in air quotes as well. And essentially, what I call them is drive-by surveys. Essentially, they're like a stripped-down version of a land title survey, if you know what that is, for a residential property. And the reason I call them drive-by surveys is because the inside joke of the industry is guys don't even get out of their truck. They're just driving by. So very low level of effort. I wouldn't even call it bare minimum because I don't even think it meets the bare minimum. So there's a lot of things guys aren't doing. So they're essentially, they're taking a shortcut. So what kind of shortcuts are they taking? I don't want to get too technical, but basically one example is they're not looking for joiner deeds. They're not. So they're only pulling the subject deed for the vesting deed for their subject parcel. They're not looking at any of the neighboring deeds or any of the neighboring surveys, which means they're missing any potential gaps or overlaps in the record. So that's just an example of what they're doing. Or another example of a quick shortcut, they're tying two centerline monds and putting a whole lot in per record, and they're not looking for any monuments that might have been set on the other property corners. That's another example. So there's a lot of, I should say a lot, there's a few surveyors in the U.S. that will do those so-called mortgage surveys. I don't think they're a good product. I don't think they comply with most professional standards or even basic ethics. And if you're paying for a mortgage survey, you're basically wasting your money, in my opinion. So there's this idea that, well, if you've done a bunch of those mortgage surveys before, you can go in and freshen up, again, an air quote, a mortgage survey from a few years ago. I don't think that's true. I want to do a separate video on why I think that's the case. I don't want to get into it in this video, but basically, that's one reason why we have this idea. There's guys that do mortgage surveys. We don't have that problem over here on the West Coast, but I know they do more of it over on the East Coast. Another problem, I think, is real estate professionals, so especially agents and brokers, perpetuate this idea that a survey should only cost a few $100s. And I know that because I talk to people a lot, and they say, well, my broker, my agent told me it should only be a few $100s. And really, those people most of the time have no business telling people that, because they don't know what they're talking about. I don't tell people how much an appraisal should cost, because I think you should talk to a real estate appraiser about that. And I don't tell people what a home inspection should cost, because I think you should talk to a home inspector about that. And I don't think real estate agents should tell people what a survey should cost, because they really don't know. They don't understand. I'm not saying that there might be exceptions to that rule, but as a general rule, most real estate professionals don't understand what's involved in performing a land survey, and they don't know what factors impact our costs. So I think that's the second reason why this idea is out there. So essentially, who's willing to perform a boundary survey for a few $100s? Well, it's individuals that cheat or take shortcuts, and we already talked about some of those. It's individuals that break the law. So most places in the United States have some kind of public filing requirement. So if you meet certain conditions, you have to file a map of your survey with the county or local government. And a lot of guys that are doing surveys for a few $100s, they don't follow that requirement, and it's poorly enforced. So they're breaking the law. Or they're just what I call fly-by-night operator. They're not legitimate business people. They don't carry professional liability insurance. They don't carry business insurance. And, they don't have, you can't get a hold of them. A lot of guys don't really do a good professional job of trying to find out what their clients need to accomplish. And I've got a really good, I'm going to end the video, but if you're curious about that, I've got a really good article that's going to be on our website soon, redefinedhorizons.com, called the $1,200 lot survey that did more harm than good. It's about a surveyor that did a $1,200 lot survey, boundary survey, up in Sonora, California, and basically wasted his client's money because he didn't understand what the client was trying to accomplish. So I encourage you to read that. So I'm going to end this video, but I'll do a couple more videos and talk about this idea of freshening up a survey, why I don't think it's really appropriate, and I'll talk a little bit more about what are some of the things that impact the cost of a boundary survey. So thanks for watching, guys. I appreciate it.